What are classes? Let's have a look about what classes are and how we can use them a little bit in this unit. Classes build upon the same idea of modeling entities that we've used with structs. So it's similar to a struct, but it's slightly different. Classes are used usually to model more complex entities than the structs are. So structs we generally think about as being simple data that we pass around, whereas classes sort of build upon that and add more dynamic behavior and complexity to them. Classes have their own terminology associated with them to such a level that variables created of a class are usually called objects. So an object is an instance of a class. You declare the class, that's your template, and your object is an instance. We don't sort of have that same idea for structs. You declare the struct, and an instance of the struct is, well, just a bit of data. But because of the way we think about objects and we think about classes, it gives us a whole new set of dynamics to discuss. It's a more complex way of managing your software, and it will be something that we look at in future units. Now, like structs, we can have data within our class. So the class or the object that we create from the class will have data associated with it, just like the fields we have inside our structs. We can also have methods associated with the class. So a method is a functional procedure, but one that exists on the struct or on the class itself. So this is accessed in the same way, so use the dot notation, but what you access is not a bit of data, but a method, a function, or a procedure. And that method will have access to the value, the object, or the struct that you executed that upon. Now remember, objects are really going to be the focus of an entire programming unit. And at the moment, I just want you to know that they exist, and we're going to make some small use of them in this unit. But we're not really going to build objects. That's not the purpose of this unit. We want to understand the more fundamental concepts, and then object-oriented programming, the next unit, will build upon that to help you understand how to make use of objects to do bigger and more complex things. So for now, let's have a look at how we can use objects. And we've been using objects already. String is an object. So let's have a look at string and what we can do with it. We'll just have a look at one thing where we can access the length method. So this calculates the length of the string that you currently have. We could use that to output something. So here I've got some code where we're reading in the user's name and we're outputting that name. And I've compiled it over here. We can see that it's running. What I could do down here is tell the user how long their name is. So we could write line, something like your name has, and we could add to that. We'll have to convert it to a string because it is an integer. What are we going to convert to the string? Well, we're going to get the name, and from the name, I'm going to access the length. There we go. And then after that, we can write the word characters just to complete our message. So what are we doing here? We're going to say your name has, and then access the length property of the string to determine the number of characters in the name and output that in that message. So if I go and compile the project and run it, I can type in my name, and we can see it tells me how many characters I have in that name. There's 4 characters. Whereas if we do a different name, we see that we get the right number of characters for that name as well. So this is how you access a method on an object. So the variable here, this is a string variable, so we can think about that as a string object. We can then access the length of that string, and that will give us access, or that in itself, notice the brackets here, that is a method. That method calculates something. So in this case, it uses this value, the object that you execute this upon. So you say, give me the length of this object. And that in this case is a string object. And the string object has inside it a length method. It's just like accessing the fields inside a struct, except the string or any other object can have things like methods, such as the length method, as well as data that you might access. Okay, we're going to make a little bit of use of objects, but it will be just to access methods that exist on objects that come in the standard libraries. That will make our lives a little bit easier. All right, I hope that's been useful.